The silence lasted about 4 seconds. I know this because I counted them afterward. The way you reconstruct a moment when you want to understand exactly what happened in it. 4 seconds is not long in absolute terms. In a restaurant on a Friday evening, with two people who have just met sitting across from each other and the ambient noise of other tables carrying on around them, 4 seconds of silence is a very specific thing. Long enough for the air to change. Long enough for her to understand that I had meant what I said. Long enough for me to understand that I had said something that was going to matter for longer than the evening. She looked at me. I looked at her. She said, "That's the first time anyone said something like that." I said, "Then everyone else has been wrong." The silence after that one was different. Not the held breath kind. The kind that comes after something has been decided. Our friends, who had arranged this and were at a separate table pretending not to watch us, would later say they had not expected it to go this way. Nobody had expected it to go this way. I think, if I'm being honest, nobody had expected me to say what I said, including me. But I had seen her, and I had said the thing that was true, and the room had gone quiet for 4 seconds. And then she had looked at me the way a person looks at something they weren't expecting to find. Let me explain how we got there. My name is Daniel Yeo. I am 37 years old. I work in documentary photography. I spend a significant portion of my life looking carefully at things and deciding whether and how to show them to people who haven't seen them. It is a job that rewards attention and patience and the ability to notice what is worth noticing, which are skills that transfer, I have found, somewhat imperfectly to the rest of life. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in which the second bedroom is a dark room I still use, even though most of my work is digital now. Because there is something about the process, the slow emergence of an image in developer fluid. The moment when the thing you saw comes back as evidence that you saw it, that I am not ready to give up. I cook well enough. I read more than is probably optimal. I was not looking for anything in particular. I was, in the specific sense, content, which is a thing that sounds settled and is sometimes the thing that precedes an earthquake. The earthquake arrived in the form of my friend Marcus calling on a Wednesday to say he knew someone I should meet. I said I wasn't really looking. He said she wasn't really looking either. I said that seemed like a reason not to set us up. He said no, it was the reason to set us up. And he said it in the tone of someone who has thought about this more than they are admitting. I said fine. Her name was Inez Cavalcanti. She was 34. She was a structural engineer, the kind of work that requires understanding how things hold together under pressure. Which I would understand later was not incidental to who she was. She was Brazilian Portuguese, had been in the country for 6 years, and had the accent of someone who thinks in multiple languages and has let them reach an accommodation. She had strong opinions about bridges, which she shared if you asked and did not perform if you didn't. She had a scar. It ran from above her left eyebrow to just below the cheekbone. Not faint, not the kind that requires proximity to notice, the kind that is simply part of the geography of her face. She had gotten it in an accident when she was 19, which I learned later on another evening. On this evening, I did not know its origin. I did not need to know its origin. I knew what I saw. What I saw was a woman who walked into a restaurant on a Friday evening and looked across the room with the directness of someone who is used to assessing situations quickly and has made peace with being assessed in return. She was wearing a dark green jacket. She moved through the space with the posture of a person who does not waste motion. She found our table, and she looked at me, and she said, Daniel. Like a confirmation rather than a question. I said, Inez. We sat down. Marcus and his girlfriend Priya were at a table 12 feet away. I had been told they were there for moral support. I understood they were there because they wanted to see what happened. What happened was that I looked at her, at all of her, at the directness of her eyes and the quality of her attention and the scar that was simply part of the face of the most composed person I had seen in a long time. And I said the thing I said. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The setup had not been sold to me as a difficult situation. Marcus had said she was brilliant and direct, and that we were similar in ways that would either work very well or produce a memorable argument. He had mentioned, briefly, that she had a visible scar, and that some people found this uncomfortable, and that he thought I wouldn't. And he had moved past it with the efficiency of someone who considers it information rather than a warning. I had considered it information. I had also considered it the kind of information that reveals something about the people who find it uncomfortable, rather than about her. What I had not expected was how the evening would begin. She sat down. The waiter came and we ordered drinks, and he left. And she was looking at the menu, but I had the sense she was not reading it. And then she put the menu down, and she looked at me with the straightforwardness of someone who has decided that the efficient path is also the honest one. I want to say something, she said, before we do the small talk. I said, all right. Marcus told you about the scar, she said. It was not a question. He mentioned it, I said. She nodded once. I know because he always does. He told me he always does, when he sets me up. She said it without bitterness, simply the way she said things that were factual. He thinks it's considerate. I think it means the first 15 minutes of these evenings are spent on it one way or another, whether I address it or not. That seems like it would be tiring, I said. She looked at me. The slight recalibration of someone processing an unexpected response. It is, she said. Then let's not, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Most people, she said carefully, either don't look at it, which means they're looking at it, or they look at it and then say something. Usually something kind, which they mean, but which still makes it the center of the table. I'm not going to say something kind about it, I said. She went still. I looked at her, at the scar that ran from above her eyebrow to below her cheekbone, at the way it sat in the geography of her face as simply as any other feature, at the fact that it had not for one moment been what I had noticed first. The first thing I noticed, I said, was that you said my name like you'd already decided it was me, before you were close enough to be sure. She looked at me. The second thing was the jacket, I said. The green. It's a specific choice. The silence had arrived by now. 4 seconds of it. The ambient noise of the restaurant continuing around us while we sat in a small pocket of stillness that had been made by what I'd said. She said, "That's the first time anyone said something like that." I said, "Then everyone else has been wrong." The second silence was different. Decided. She picked up her menu. "What are you thinking of ordering?" she said. I looked at mine. I had not read a word of it. "I have no idea," I said. She almost smiled. Not quite the thing before a smile, the small structural shift that precedes it. "Fish," she said. "I think. Tell me about the documentary work." She asked good questions. This is not a small thing. Most people ask questions as a social mechanism, to fill space, to perform interest, to await their turn. She asked questions because she wanted the answers, and the difference was audible. She asked about the dark room, which she had not expected when I mentioned it. And her follow-up was specific. What does it change, for you, about the relationship to the image? I had been asked about the darkroom many times. No one had asked it that way before. I told her about the emergence, the way an image surfaces in developer fluid not all at once, but in order of density. The darkest areas first, then the midtones, then the light. The way you learn to read what's coming before it fully arrives. The way the photograph teaches you, in that process, something about what you were actually looking at when you took it, which is sometimes different from what you thought you were looking at. She listened with the full-body stillness of someone who is actually receiving information rather than waiting for a pause. Then she said, "Structures are like that. When you're load testing something, you learn what's going to fail before it fails if you know what to look for. The stress shows up in the material first. And if you don't know what to look for," I said, "then you find out the hard way," she said. "But usually it leaves a mark." She said it neutrally. She was talking about engineering. She was also not only talking about engineering, and she knew I understood this, and she did not look away when she said it. That was the moment I understood we were not doing small talk in the way most people do small talk. We were doing the other kind, the kind where the surface conversation is also a separate, deeper conversation, and both people can hear both. I have poor survival instincts around women who speak in two registers at once. She had ordered fish. I had ordered whatever I'd said when the waiter came because I'd been listening to her and not the menu. It arrived and was fine. I did not particularly care what I was eating. She told me about bridges, not performed enthusiasm, the real kind. The kind that arrives when you ask a person about the thing they've spent years actually thinking about. And the thinking pours out sideways because there's too much of it to fit through the front door. She told me about the Millau Viaduct, about the engineering choices that are also aesthetic choices, and how that boundary is more porous than people suppose. She told me about a pedestrian bridge she'd worked on, early in her career, that had required a specific solution to a specific problem with the deck expansion, and how the solution had come to her in the middle of the night, and she had written it on her arm because she didn't have paper. "Did you have to wash it off before the morning?" I said. "I transcribed it first," she said. "I wasn't going to risk it." "What happened to the bridge?" I said. "It's still standing," she said. And then, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who finds this fact genuinely meaningful, "I drove over it 3 months ago." I thought about that, about building something and being able to return to it and find it still there. "That's what photography is supposed to do," I said. "Make the thing persist past the moment." She looked at me. The full attention, all of it. "Does it?" she said. "Sometimes," I said, "when you've gotten it right." "How do you know when you've gotten it right?" I thought about this the way she'd been thinking about my questions, actually, not reflexively. "When the image shows you something you were feeling but didn't know you were feeling," I said. "When you look at it later and think, that's what it was. That's what I was actually looking at." She held this. "I want to see your work," she said. "Not flattery, information." "I want to see the bridge," I said. Something shifted in her expression. Not the smile, not yet, but the approach of it. "That's a day trip," she said. "I have weekends," I said. She looked at me with the full directness she'd come in with. The same assessment she'd made across the restaurant, except now it had 7 months more behind it. No, not yet one evening, but the kind of evening that contains more than most evenings. "Marcus is going to be insufferable," she said. "He is," I said. "He's watching us," she said. "He has been since we sat down," I said. "Should we give him something to see?" she said. It was a question and also not a question. The way she asked things she had already decided the answer to. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. Slowly. The way you do something when you want to be sure. She turned her hand over, and her fingers came around mine with the decisiveness of someone who does not do things by accident. 12 feet away, Marcus said something to Priya that I could not hear. Priya said something back. I did not look over. "The bridge," I said. "Saturday," she said. "Saturday," I said. We went on Saturday. She drove because she knew where it was, and she talked about the engineering the whole way in the way a person talks about something they have made peace with loving, not performing, not explaining, just speaking from inside the knowledge of it. I looked out the window and listened and asked questions that kept her going, because I had understood the previous evening that the questions were the things she responded to. The bridge was a pedestrian bridge over a river that ran through a small town about 90 minutes from the city. It was not a famous bridge. It was a practical bridge, well-designed and quietly beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they have been solved correctly. She stood at the railing and looked at the deck and then at the river and then back at the deck. And her expression was the one I had been waiting to photograph since I met her. Open in a way her face was not always open. The expression of someone who is looking at evidence of their own capability and is briefly allowing themselves to feel it. I took the photograph. Not secretly. She knew I had my camera. She heard the shutter. She turned and looked at me, and I lowered the camera. "Was that it?" she said. "The one you were feeling but didn't know you were feeling?" "Yes," I said. She looked at the camera, then at me. "I want to see it," she said. "Come to the darkroom," I said, "and you can watch it emerge." She held my gaze. The decision was already made. I could see that. But she held my gaze the way she held things she was certain about, not rushing. "Okay," she said. We had lunch in the small town, and she told me about the expansion joint solution and drew it on a napkin with the pen she always had. And I asked questions until she'd answered all of them, and she said at the end, "Nobody asks about the technical part." "The technical part is the whole thing," I said. She looked at me. "Yes," she said. "It is." She kept the napkin. 4 months later, she stood in my darkroom for the first time, watching the photograph emerge. The bridge photograph. I had been waiting to print it properly, which I told her was about the paper and the chemistry, which was true and not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I had wanted her to be there when it came up. We stood in the red light and watched the image surface in the developer, her at the railing, looking at her own bridge with the open expression I'd been waiting for. And she was quiet in the watching, the full stillness. "That's what you were looking at," she said. "Yes," I said. "When?" she said. "At what specific moment?" "When you looked at the deck," I said. "Before you knew I was watching." She looked at the photograph for a long time. "I didn't know I made that face," she said. "You do," I said, "when something you built is still standing." She was quiet. Then she said, "I want a print of it." "It's yours," I said. "I made it for you." She looked at me in the red light with the photograph still in the developer between us and the expression she'd had at the bridge, except wider, less guarded, the version she had when she knew she was seen and had decided to let it be so. 2 years later, when people asked how we met, she told them, blind date, mutual friends, restaurant. And then she always said, "He noticed the wrong things." I always said, "I noticed the right things." She always said, "That's what I meant." The photograph hangs in her office. The bridge photograph, her at the railing, the open expression, Her colleagues have asked about it. She tells them it's a bridge she worked on early in her career. Which is true. She doesn't mention that someone was watching, that someone made a photograph of the look on her face when she found it still standing, that someone had said to her on the first evening that the scar was not the first thing he saw, and that the first thing was how she said his name. She doesn't mention it because it is one of those private things that are not secrets, but simply theirs. The knowledge of being seen, carried in the ordinary place of an image on a wall, visible to everyone and understood by two. I look at that photograph sometimes, think about the 4 seconds of silence, and the second silence that was different, and the way she had said then, everyone else has been wrong, like a person receiving information they had always suspected was out there somewhere. Some things take a long time to hear said. Some people are patient enough to wait. What would you have done? Would you have said what you noticed? Or kept it inside the careful silence most people choose? And have you ever found out that someone had been looking at you, really looking, past the thing you were most self-conscious about, and felt something shift in how you understood being seen? Tell me in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.